Tips from Trestle is brought to you by the Belter Companies, Navigator Group Purchasing, and eMenu Choice Point of Sale. Welcome to Tips from Trestle. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the senior living industry with a unique focus on food, hospitality, and leadership. I'm your host, Aaron Fish. As a 25-year veteran of the hospitality industry, I've focused my work on creating exceptional experiences for the customers we serve. My goal for this podcast? Educate, inform, and inspire leaders in senior living to bring food and hospitality to the front of mind in our industry. Let's bring the innovative and passionate spirit of hospitality to everything that we do, for the residents, families, guests, and employees we serve each and every day. So what are we waiting for? Let's get to it. Joining me today on Tips from Trestle is Alison Anne. Working with restaurant owners to build their teams and their bottom line was never Alison's first choice of career. She was going to be an actor, and this restaurant thing was just a side gig. But that industry life got into her blood, and 16 years later, she was leading a team of 50 people doing $5 million a year in revenue in one of DC's biggest sports bars. After seeing the high level of burnout, dissatisfaction, and turnover plaguing the industry, she discovered she had a knack for drilling down into the heart of what makes restaurants and restaurant people tick. Now her love for the industry has her focus on employee support and well-being, from the general manager all the way down to the dishwasher, and working with her clients to connect their vision and growth initiatives to their employees' needs. Alison lives outside DC and is credentialed with the International Coaching Federation as a professional certified coach, and she still occasionally fights the itch to hop back behind the stick. Alison, thanks for joining me today on Tips from Trestle.
Thanks so much for having me, Aaron.
So, okay, let's start with, you went from acting to restaurants. I mean, I've heard the kind of stereotype of, well, you go to be an actor, and so you wait tables until you get your big break. But I'm guessing it sounds like that went the opposite direction for you.
Kind of a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it did start as the absolute stereotype. I was 17 and a friend of mine from middle school actually got in touch with me. She was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm working at this restaurant. It's so fun. We need people. Like, you should totally apply and come work with me." And my thought was, well, like, oh, I mean, that's what actors do. Actors get jobs in restaurants. So this is perfect.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I was still in high school at the time. So I was, working around doing the school plays and things like that. And I got my theater degree. I started a professional acting career. And it was exactly that. I found that it always played second fiddle to my restaurant career rather than kind of the stereotype, which is you have this restaurant job that plays second fiddle to your acting career.
Okay. And so obviously then you transitioned and you spent a ton of time in sports bar, or was it multiple different kinds of restaurants?
Multiple. I have, for the most part, if you can think of it, I've worked it. So I've done corporate, like sit down restaurants. I've done small bed and breakfast owned by a single person. And then I really started to kind of build a career and get my footing, started moving into management when I was working in more of the DC still has a grandfathered in tavern law where you can have it is a bar. It's they have food because they have to have food, but like this is a place where you come to go to a bar.
Okay.
Yeah. And so,
And
pool hall, games, sports bars.
okay. And so, I mean, obviously you did that for a little while, but like most people in food service and restaurants and hospitality, the 80-hour work week catches up with you and you're kind of like, well, how do I get out of this? What do I do? For me, it was hotels, and stumbling into senior living because of life circumstances, right? It wasn't something that I had ever planned on doing. And then realized that I could do all of what I was doing in hotels and restaurants in senior living. And it was kind of a win when it comes to that. But you took a little bit different path when you saw the burnout from working in the industry and got into coaching. Kind of tell us how that came about for you.
Yeah, I took a very twisty, windy path to get there. But I have a distinct memory of the moment that you're talking about. I was doing a children's theater show at the time. So I would perform two, sometimes three performances a day in the morning. And then I was bartending at night. And I had a shift on a Saturday night that started at 9:30 at night. And I remember just walking down the steps and hearing the drunk people before I could see them. And like my whole body just sunk in on itself and went, I don't think I can do this anymore. And so I started looking around for other opportunities, other things that were available to me. And I ended up getting into my health. I was overweight. I was eating really poorly. I wasn't exercising. And I got into a new relationship. And so that all just kind of snowballed. And I decided I like put my foot down and I thought, I really need to get in shape. This has to stop. And this does relate, I promise. So I found a health and fitness company that whose mission I really believe in. I ended up exercising. I completely changed the way that I eat. The way that I eat right now, it looks nothing like the way that I used to eat when I was in the height of bartending every night. And my coworkers started to notice, and they were saying, like, "Oh my gosh, like, what are you doing? What's going on? You look great. Oh my gosh, you have so much energy. What's happening?" And I was just so sold on this whole process that I was going through because I felt great, I looked great, and so oh my gosh, it's this company, I'm doing this program. You've got to do it with me. It's so great. And I told them how much money I was paying to do it every month, and they would immediately oh my gosh, oh I can't afford that. That's too expensive. And I sat and I was like, what? Like, I
Yeah,
literally put cash money in your hand last night. Like, I know you have the money. What are you talking about?
right. And so from there, you're transitioning into being a coach, and you focused in on restaurants and hospitality teams, but you're not a typical business coach, right? When we think of business coaches, we think of somebody that comes in and teaches us about leadership or management principles, or here's how you need to run your operation, and here's how you should do menu management and food costing and all those kinds of things. The kind of like business coach that most of us would work with as we transition. But you kind of taken it a little bit deeper and kind of talk to us a little bit about what that's like and what how you focus on that.
Yeah, absolutely. You are 1,000% correct. Yeah, I don't teach, I don't train. I am happy to support my clients to partner to find resources if they think that there is teaching or training that they need. But my version of coaching is it's a style in which we believe that our clients have absolutely everything that they need in order to succeed. They are whole, they are perfect, complete human beings. They have the knowledge, they have the brilliance, they have the ideas, the creativity, they have the drive. And all they need to do is move all of the obstacles out of the way that are keeping them from accessing that.
Today, I want to tell you about one of Tressel's senior living partners, Belter. Belter is a food service design, equipment, and supply company that has been providing expert guidance to the food and beverage industry for nearly a century. A strategic partner to the most successful food service operations in the country, Belter provides support in kitchen and bar design, equipment procurement and install, and supplies. Their team of senior living food service experts have experience across the continuum of care. From independent living to skilled nursing and CCRCs, Belter specializes in right-sizing new facilities, modernizing remodels, and providing the right food service equipment and supplies. At Belter, they are committed to creating memorable experiences for their customers and their guests. With their top-notch team and a global network of quality supplier partners, their customer-focused approach is built on a foundation of collaboration and decades of industry experience. So thank you for considering Belter for all of your food service needs. So if I understand you right, this isn't we're going to pour a whole bunch of stuff into you. It's really more about peeling back the layers to find what's in the way and then taking what you inherently are or can do and bringing that kind of out and making it front and center.
Exactly. Yes.
So how do you do that? Like, talk to us a little bit about that process, right? Because I mean, on the surface, that sounds, it sounds great, but I know personally for me, that's a really kind of hard thing to think about or to do, right? Because I know what I'm good at, but I don't always see kind of the obstacles in my way, or it's even subconscious, right? I don't even think about it, and so talk to us a little bit about the process and what you do to kind of help people get to that point.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it for a lot of people is subconscious. So in an individual coaching session at any given time, we start with just like a really surface request that someone's brought. Oh my gosh, I need to figure out how to do the schedule this week. I'm freaking out about it. I don't know how to do the schedule. And a lot of what I do, I'm trained to listen to not only what people are saying, but what they're not saying and what's missing, and to just really start to get super curious and ask questions that, just like you said, they take the conversation 3, 4, sometimes 7 layers deeper to really find out, like, what's actually going on here. Like, you've been a restaurant manager for 7 years. Like, what do you mean you don't know how to do the schedule? Like, I don't, come on, what's actually going on here? And oftentimes we find that whatever that deeper conversation is that we're having, it's something that's affecting not only this question of the schedule, but it's looking at, do we trust ourselves to make decisions? Are we listening to the things that we really, really want to be moving forward? Are we taking initiative? Are we listening to ourselves, or are we worried what people are going to think about us? Are we worried that things aren't going to go well? Are we trying to control things and make things be perfect and just right before we can move forward? Kind of all of those very human, vulnerable obstacles that come up when we're trying to build something, because we just get scared.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so, like, if somebody were to kind of, okay, this is something that sounds like it makes sense. How would I go about, like, where would someone even start, right? Obviously, if they wanted to try and do this and think about this on their own, but where does this start? Where's the starting point for this, and kind of how do you build from that?
So I generally find that the starting point for clients before they come find me is they kind of they're like a little bit fed up. And you've been in hospitality, and I'm sure that in senior living, it's the same kind of situation where there's a lot of tradition. There's a lot of set structure of, like, this is the way things go. This is how it's always been done.
Definitely. And so
Yeah.
with that, how it's always been done, is it you try to break down the walls around that, or how does that work?
Sometimes, yeah, a lot of times that this is how it's always been done becomes a box that we live in. We can't really see outside of that box. And so that's typically where people start, is they all of a sudden realize, like, I'm in a box and I really think there's a better life outside of this box, but
Yeah,
I don't know how to get out of the box. I live in the box.
yeah. And so, when I think about that idea of being stuck in a box, right? It's almost the the kind of like that transition that I was talking about where I made from hotels to senior living, right? Because obviously there's big differences in those things, but in essence, I was doing the same thing. I wanted to bring the same levels of service and hospitality and customer experience, but I was kind of stuck in that initial box of this is what you're supposed to do. You need to break out of this to be successful, to be innovative. And so, if someone were to want to either pop the top off that box or push the sides of it down, um, what kinds of things, where are things that they can look at? What are things that they can do to really kind of dig in and say, okay, this is how I can kind of break free from this mindset?
So the first places that I always look with people, it's two places that we always start. I always start by kind of leading my clients a little bit in the first couple of months through some exercises, some conversations that we're going to have. And the first place to really look is who are you? Who are you as a person? What do you believe about yourself? How do you relate to yourself in the world? Like, what are the qualities that maybe you have that you haven't embraced, or what are qualities that you want to have in the future? How can we start to really incorporate that into the choices that you're making now?
So it that sounds on the surface sounds great, right? But let's be honest, human nature makes it, at least for me, right? It makes it really difficult to do that kind of introspective look because um, we all know that there's good and bad when you do that, right? Like, and a lot of us tend to avoid the negativity, right? We're either afraid to embrace it or we're worried that, oh, it's a weakness, I can't show my weaknesses, and so when you talk to people or work with clients through that process, how do you get them through embracing the idea of you got to take the good and the bad, and kind of do that full, it's probably a bad terminology, but like that SWOT analysis of yourself, right? How do you go about doing that?
I would love to just introduce a concept that I introduce in my coaching, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So one of the first things that we look at when I start working with someone is that there are two distinct experiences that they have. And one of them we call essence in my coach training. That's the heart of who you are. It's unchangeable. It lives inside you always. It's the warmth and the brilliance and the connection and the relationship you have with people. Like, it's the flow state if you think about it in terms of the emotional intelligence trainings that you hear. This is when you are in your essence, like you're just fully 100% present and you, and things kind of go more smoothly. So that is who you are. And there is
Okay.
a distinction between that and your survival mechanism, which are the actions that you take and the things that you do when you get scared. So,
So is that like flight, or is it sorry, fight or flight? Is it something like that? Is it similar, or am I kind of not following what you're
no,
saying?
you're totally right on the money. It might not always be that, but fight, flight, freeze, fawn, I think it's like expanding every month. They're adding something new to it. Yeah, those are those kind of automatic reactions that we've built up based on how we respond to fear, how we respond to concerns and worries and our emotions. And it's not actually who we are. They're just these choices that we make based on, how things have gone in our past. So, to your original question, one of the first things that we establish is like all of those negative things that you might have trouble looking at. We actually we can have some compassion for it. We really take a look at like, hey, you probably came up with that reaction, that response, that quality, because at some point you really needed it because you felt unsafe in your life. And maybe you just don't need it anymore. So we look at practices and ways that we can start kind of putting down things that aren't working for us anymore so that we can embrace the things that are working.
Yeah, and one of the things, we went through this as a group, a couple months ago because you were wanting to kind of show us what you did, and I, you talked about like how these things are all inside our comfort zone, and so kind of talk a little bit about that. And the other thing that I took away from that was you made the note that I wrote down here that the possibilities are outside of your comfort zone. Kind of talk through what you meant by that and how someone can embrace all of that to kind of grow and develop themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll use an example here that I think will resonate. Um, have you ever had the experience where you're like, I can't take time off work because if I do, like people don't understand what I do. We're going to fall behind on my work. They're not going to be able to keep up with it. And I better just stay and do the work. Like it'll be easier if I just do it myself than try to hand it off to somebody else.
Yeah, no, I live that every day now as an
Yes.
entrepreneur, right? Like we're recording this here on the 3rd of January. And so the holidays were really hard, right? Because it's like I'm letting everything slip because I'm taking time off and I had to try and get comfortable with that. And it was hard for sure.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, that showed even before I was an entrepreneur. I had it at my job when I was the AGM of the bar, and my boss, oh my gosh, like he he couldn't take vacation to save his life because he just had to be present, had to know what was going on. He was just so concerned that things were going to fall apart without him. And so it's that experience of like, that's what we're accustomed to. We're accustomed to having some level of control. We are accustomed to knowing what's going on. We're accustomed to being kind of the point person. So that's an experience of like, that's all within our comfort zones. And there's this possibility outside where you get to like take breaks and take vacations and have well-being time. And it's scary. And so we avoid it.
Yeah. Do you think that that comes from, because this is something that I've experienced even in senior living, right? Because even though, we kind of live a little more of a regimented, like 8-12-5 schedule for food service, we are on 24/7 because we have residents in our communities. And so, do you find that it, it's hard to get people to do that, to pull themselves out of that, because they do get into that rut, or when they get into this process, do light bulbs just start going off all over for people?
It truly depends on the person. Um, I have some people that I've worked with who are willing to just make massive changes and see what happens and be with the consequences. And then there are some people where that's just not that it's too far outside of their comfort zone. They just won't do it. And it's always better to make any progress than no progress at all. So sometimes I have people where it's like, okay, what does 1% look like? Like, what if you took 5 minutes of a break every single day and you left your phone and like no one can get in touch with you for 5 whole minutes? Like, what if we just start there? So it really does. It depends on the person. And so that's why the style of coaching that I do, it's a partnership. It is not hierarchy or anything like that. I'm not telling anyone anything because I don't know the kind of person that you're going to be and what's really, really going to work for you to start making changes. And probably you don't either.
Navigator is the largest full-service GPO that exclusively focuses on the senior living community. And what that means is we provide products and services that help our members provide a great environment for their residents, such as like MRO, hospitality equipment, food, business products, as well as technology solutions. We actually surround our members with a level of support unmatched in the industry.
That's very true. I tend to find myself more on the resistant side sometimes. You know, I get into my routines and I find things that are comfortable to do. And I know I need to get outside of that and push. And so if you had to, for someone like that, what's the probably the biggest piece of advice you would give them to give them permission, if you will, let them give themselves permission to take the 5 minute break or to do the one thing? Like, what's that approach? What's that advice you give them?
This is it's so perfect because this actually speaks to the second place that I focus when I first start with clients. So the first was, who are you as a person? The other one is vision and goals. So often we don't even slow down enough to let ourselves look at the future and say like, hey, how do I actually want this to go? And so my advice would be for that person to look at like, what would the ideal outcome look like? No one is like holding a gun to anyone's heads. You don't actually have to take action on any of this, but just allow yourself to start imagining, like, if I had a magic wand that I could just wave over my life, what would be different? How would it go? And like, get super, super clear on what that vision is. And then from there, look at, okay, well, what is 1% of 1% of this that I actually do have space to start working on today that I could implement now? You know, we don't go from where we are right now to like living my dream life in between 1 week coaching sessions. We look at incremental change that over time adds up to, just like you said, like these massive breakthrough moments, these massive changes in people's lives, just because they're willing to get started.
Yeah, that's such a that process and journey sounds like, you know, something that you can't do it overnight. I think a lot of times, I know in for me in my previous roles and careers, it was always like everything has to be done now. We got to get to it now. It needs to be taken care of now. And I think hospitality professionals, senior living professionals, we're kind of always living in this like service to others. So it's got to be like immediate, right? And so I think it's
Mm-hmm.
a really hard transition to get from there to where you're talking about. But the idea of doing it incrementally probably solves a lot of that confusion or hesitation around it. So we're coming up on time here. And so if you were to kind of leave us with any like lasting thoughts or like anything that you want people to take away from this conversation today, what would that be?
For me, the biggest thing is just trust yourself. You are so much more brilliant and capable and creative and thoughtful and on top of things than you probably will ever let yourself believe. And to just be able to know that, like, if you take one more step, if you take like one more action, it's all going to be okay. It's actually probably going to turn out a lot better than you think. And it's like, really give yourself the opportunity to discover that the outcomes, the results they're so much better than you expected them to be. And the consequences are so much less dire than you expected them to be. And just
Uh,
keep doing that.
yeah, no, I think that's all really great advice. And so, um, Allie, thanks for joining me today and kind of diving into this, like finding your why and trusting yourself. If the the listeners want to reach out and connect with you and learn more about this and your process and how they can maybe start this journey as well, how can they do that?
You can find me in many places on the internet. Our website is www.restaurantrevolution.me. M as in Mary, E as in Edward. And then you can also reach out to me personally. My email address is allison@restaurantrevolution.me. I'm on LinkedIn as Alison Anne and on Twitter as @restaurantrevolution. And I would just love to know how I can have conversations with people and support them in making actual true change in their lives.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today on Tips from Trestle, and best of luck in the new year.
Thank you so much for having me, Aaron. Same to you.
So there you have it, another one in the books. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. Please follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter @TipsFromTrestle. You can also learn more about the work I do by following me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And be sure to check out Trestle Hospitality Concepts at www.trestlehospitalityconcepts.com. I'm your host, Aaron Fish, and this has been another episode of Tips from Trestle.